I didn't know his name when I saved her. The November air bit through my jacket as I stood at the downtown bus stop, scrolling through apartment listings I couldn't afford. My headphones played some indie track I'd forgotten the name of, volume high enough to drown out the usual city noise. Then everything changed in the span of 3 seconds. A black SUV screeched to a halt 15 feet from where I stood, tires smoking against the asphalt. The back door flew open before the vehicle fully stopped, and 2 men in identical dark suits jumped out. Their movements sharp and military precise. They looked like Secret Service agents, all earpieces and stone faces. But what caught my attention wasn't them. It was the tiny figure that bolted from the vehicle's far side. A little girl, maybe 5 years old, wearing a white coat that was too clean for the dirty sidewalk. Her dark hair flew behind her as she ran, and even from a distance I could hear her voice crack with fear. "I don't want to go. Call my dad. Please." She stumbled on the curb, catching herself with small hands that scraped against concrete. The bodyguards moved toward her, but they were blocked. Suddenly, as if materializing from thin air, at least 20 people swarmed the scene. Cameras, microphone, flashing lights that turned the evening street into a strobe nightmare. Paparazzi. They moved like a pack, shouting questions that made no sense, shoving equipment toward the child who was now frozen on the sidewalk. Her small body trembled, hands covering her ears, eyes squeezed shut. The bodyguards tried to form a barrier, but there were too many. The crowd pushed harder. Something in my chest twisted. I yanked out my headphones and moved without thinking. My legs carried me across the street, dodging a taxi that honked angrily. I didn't have a plan. I just knew that no kid should look that terrified. "Hey!" I dropped to one knee in front of her, making myself small, non-threatening. Her eyes snapped open wide, brown, wet with tears. "It's okay. You're safe now." She stared at me like I was speaking another language. I pulled off my jacket, the blue one I bought at a thrift store last month, and draped it over her head like a tent. The fabric was big enough to cover most of her small frame. Then I positioned myself between her and the cameras, creating a human shield. "Who are you?" A photographer shoved a lens at my face. "Flash, flash, are you family?" Another voice, aggressive and demanding. "Step aside, buddy. We just want a picture." "Back the hell off." My voice came out harder than I'd ever heard it. Firm, protective, almost unrecognizable. The crowd hesitated for half a second, but it was enough. I felt the little girl's fingers grip the back of my shirt, holding on like I was her last anchor in a storm. "Where's my dad?" Her voice was muffled under the jacket, shaking with fear. "He's coming," I whispered, even though I had no idea if that was true. "Just stay close to me." The camera flashes intensified. Questions flew from every direction. Someone tried to pull the jacket off her head, and I slapped their hand away harder than necessary. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wasn't built for confrontation. I was a freelance illustrator who spent most days alone with a sketch pad and coffee that had gone cold hours ago. But right now, in this moment, I felt like I could take on an army. Then I heard it. "Lucy." The voice cut through the chaos like a blade, sharp, commanding, and carrying a weight that made even the paparazzi pause. I looked up, still crouched over the girl, and saw him. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, wearing a black overcoat that probably cost more than my rent. His face was all sharp angles, high cheekbones, the jawline that could cut glass, and eyes so dark they looked black in the dim streetlight. His hair was perfectly styled despite the situation, and he moved with the kind of confidence that came from owning every room he walked into. I recognized him immediately. Silas Crowe. I'd seen his face on a magazine cover at the grocery store checkout last month. Tech entrepreneur. Youngest self-made billionaire in the industry, known for being ruthless in business and almost invisible in his personal life. But right now he just looked like a terrified father. "Lucy, sweetheart." His voice cracked slightly as he pushed through the crowd, bodyguards finally catching up to form a protective circle. He dropped to his knees on the dirty sidewalk without hesitation, arms outstretched. The little girl, Lucy, let go of my shirt and ran to him. He caught her like she weighed nothing, lifting her against his chest as she buried her face in his neck. His hand cradled the back of her head, and for a moment, the infamous cold billionaire looked completely human. Then his eyes found mine. I was still kneeling on the pavement, holding my now dusty jacket, probably looking like an idiot. His gaze locked onto me with an intensity that made my breath catch. Dark eyes scanned my face like he was memorizing every detail, filing it away for later. You. He paused, jaw tight, like the words were fighting their way out. Thank you. I stood awkwardly, brushing dirt off my jeans. No problem. Right place, right time, I guess. My voice sounded weird. Too casual for the situation. I started to back away, ready to disappear into the crowd and forget this whole surreal experience. But then his hand shot out and gripped my shoulder. The touch was firm, authoritative, impossible to ignore. Wait. My pulse jumped. Up close he was even more intimidating. Not in a threatening way, but in the way mountains are intimidating. Massive, unmovable, ancient. What's your name? Why was my brain short-circuiting? Peter. Peter Monroe. His expression didn't change. Unreadable. He turned his head slightly, speaking to someone behind him without breaking eye contact with me. Marcus. Get his contact information. Phone number, address. Everything. Wait. What? No. Really? I'm fine. This isn't a request, Peter Monroe. His eyes, so dark they were almost black, bore into my blue ones with an intensity that made me feel exposed. You saved my daughter. I don't take that lightly. I'm going to clear this debt. Personally. There was something in his tone. Something that told me arguing would be completely useless. This was a man who got what he wanted. Always. Without exception. A suited assistant appeared beside me with a tablet, asking for my information in a polite but insistent way. I rattled off my number and address in a daze, watching as Silas Crowe held his daughter close, whispering something in her ear that made her nod against his shoulder. Before I could process what had happened, they were gone. Swept away by bodyguards into the waiting SUV. The paparazzi scattered like roaches when the light turns on, probably afraid of legal action from someone with Silas Crowe's resources. I stood alone on the empty sidewalk, my jacket still in my hands, wondering what the hell just happened. The bus I'd been waiting for drove past without stopping. I didn't even notice. The next morning, I was making coffee in my underwear when someone knocked on my apartment door. Not a polite knock. A firm, authoritative knock that suggested the person on the other side was used to doors opening immediately. I glanced at the clock. 7:30. Nobody visited me, ever. My friends had stopped trying months ago when I'd become too absorbed in deadline-driven freelance work and avoiding phone calls. I pulled on yesterday's jeans and approached the peephole cautiously. My hand froze on the doorknob. Silas Crowe stood in the hallway of my rundown apartment building, looking like a magazine ad that had been photoshopped into the wrong setting. His suit was probably worth more than everything I own. Behind him, parked on the street visible through the hallway window, was a sleek black car that definitely didn't belong in this neighborhood. Open the door, Peter. His voice came through the thin wood, muffled but unmistakably commanding. How did he even know I was standing right here? I opened the door slowly, feeling extremely aware of my bare chest and messy hair. Mr. Crowe. Silas. He walked past me into my studio apartment without waiting for an invitation, his sharp gaze sweeping across the space in one efficient scan. I watched his eyes take in the futon that doubled as my bed, the desk covered in sketches and coffee stains, the kitchenette that was really just a hot plate and a mini fridge. His expression remained neutral, but I felt judged anyway. Come in, I guess, I said sarcastically to his back, closing the door. He ignored the comment entirely. Instead, he set a leather folder on my cluttered desk, moving aside a half-finished illustration of a dragon I'd been working on for a client who probably wouldn't pay on time. Your background check came back clean, he stated matter-of-factly, like running surveillance on strangers was completely normal. No criminal record. Part-time illustrator. Freelance income averaging below poverty line. 3 months behind on rent. Student loans in default. But he turned to face me fully. Honest. No history of deception or violence. My face burned. You ran a background check on me? Obviously, he said it like I'd asked if water was wet. Lucy wants to see you. Everything in my body went still. What? She's asked about you 7 times since last night. She calls you the blue jacket hero. Silas crossed his arms. and somehow the gesture made him look even more imposing. I don't disappoint my daughter, so, you want me to visit her or something? No. He stepped closer, too close, and I caught the scent of his cologne. Something expensive and subtle like cedar and something darker I couldn't identify. I want you to become her personal companion. I almost laughed. Excuse me. Temporary position. 3 weeks. The paparazzi situation has escalated. Lucy is traumatized by public attention. She trusts you and that trust is rare. He pushed the folder toward me. The salary is negotiable, but you'll need to live in my penthouse. Spend time with Lucy daily. Be present. My words dried up. I'm an illustrator. I don't have any experience with childcare. I don't need your resume. His hand reached out and circled my wrist. Not tight, but enough that I felt the warmth of his skin, the controlled strength in his fingers. I need your instinct. What you showed last night. I was drowning in his dark eyes. They were unreadable, intense, magnetic in a way that made my pulse race for reasons I didn't want to examine. And if I say no, he released my wrist slowly, deliberately, each finger lifting away like he was savoring the contact. You won't. His gaze shifted meaningfully to the pile of past due bills partially visible under a sketchbook. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. The implications hung in the air between us like smoke. You're bribing me. I'm offering you an opportunity. His tone didn't change. You're 3 months from eviction. Your freelance projects have dried up. This offer is equivalent to 6 months of your current income, and you'll complete it in 3 weeks, plus room and board in a penthouse rather than... He glanced around my tiny studio. My pride stung, but he wasn't wrong. The rent notice on my door was bright pink and threatening. I hadn't eaten anything except ramen and stolen coffee shop sugar packets in 4 days. I picked up the pen attached to the folder. 3 weeks, I said firmly, scanning the contract. Then I'm out. Of course. But something in his expression suggested he didn't believe that timeline any more than I did. I signed my name and the pen felt heavier than it should. Silas took the folder back, his fingers brushing mine briefly. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. It was small, controlled, barely there, but it transformed his entire face for half a second, making him look less like an untouchable billionaire and more like an actual person. Good choice, Peter. He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. A driver will pick you up tomorrow morning at 7. Pack light. Lucy attaches quickly, and I need you to be ready. As he said this, his hand briefly touched my bare shoulder, just a second of contact, warm and deliberate, before he walked out, leaving me standing in my underwear and jeans, holding a contract that would change everything. The door clicked shut. I stared at the space where he'd been standing, my shoulder still tingling from his touch. What the hell did I just agree to? I whispered to my empty apartment. My phone buzzed. A notification from my bank, rent payment processed. I blinked at the screen in confusion. I definitely hadn't made that payment. Then a text from an unknown number appeared. Consider it in advance. See you tomorrow. He'd paid my rent. Just like that. 3 months worth, plus what looked like next month's as well. I sat down on my futon, contract still in my hands, and tried to process the fact that Silas Crowe, billionaire, tech mogul, apparently incredibly efficient stalker, had just walked into my life and rearranged it in under 10 minutes. I should have felt grateful. Instead, I felt like I just signed something far more binding than a 3-week employment contract. My coffee had gone cold. I drank it anyway, staring at the dragon sketch on my desk, wondering if I'd ever finish it now. Probably not. Tomorrow I'd be living in a penthouse with a 5-year-old girl and her terrifyingly intense father. I had no idea what I was doing, but apparently, neither did my bank account. So here we were. The driver was exactly on time, 7 in the morning as promised. I'd packed a duffel bag with clothes I immediately realized weren't nice enough for wherever I was going. The car ride took 40 minutes through parts of the city I'd only seen in movies, ending at a building so tall I had to crane my neck to see the top. The penthouse was on the 47th floor. When the elevator doors opened directly into the living space, no hallway, no door, just straight into the apartment, I forgot how to breathe. Floor-to-ceiling windows displayed the entire city like a painting. The furniture was minimalist and clearly expensive. All clean lines and neutral colors, everything was perfectly organized, almost sterile in its precision. Then I heard her. "You're here! You came back!" Lucy burst from around a corner, wearing pajamas covered in cartoon cats, her dark hair wild around her face. She ran straight at me and crashed into my legs with enough force to make me stumble. I dropped my bag and instinctively steadied her small shoulders. "Hey there," I said, smiling despite my nervousness. "Yeah, I'm here." She pulled back and looked up at me with those huge brown eyes. "For how long?" "A few weeks." I crouched down to her level. "Is that okay with you?" "Yes." She bounced on her toes, then grabbed my hand and started pulling. "Come meet Mr. Fluff. He's been waiting to say hello properly." Mr. Fluff turned out to be a stuffed rabbit that had clearly seen better days. One ear was sewn on crooked and the fur was matted from years of love. Lucy placed him carefully in my hands, like she was trusting me with something precious. "He says you have kind hands," she informed me seriously. I examined the rabbit with equal seriousness. "Well, please tell Mr. Fluff that he has excellent taste." Lucy giggled, a pure, unfiltered sound that echoed in the cavernous penthouse. I glanced up and caught Silas watching from the kitchen doorway. He wore different clothes than yesterday. Dark slacks and a crisp white shirt. No tie yet. His hair was slightly damp like he'd just showered. He held a coffee mug in one hand and his expression was softer than before. Almost gentle. Our eyes met for a brief second before he looked away. The first few days developed into a rhythm I hadn't expected to enjoy. Mornings started with breakfast. Lucy was obsessed with pancakes shaped like animals and I discovered I was surprisingly good at making elephant ears out of batter. We'd watch cartoons together, though she spent most of the time explaining plot points I was apparently too old to understand naturally. Afternoons were for art. When Lucy discovered my sketchbook, she'd insisted I teach her to draw. She had talent, real talent, especially for a 5-year-old. Her lines were confident, her color choices bold. We'd sit at the massive dining table, paper spread everywhere, while she chattered constantly about everything and nothing. "Why is the sky blue? How do birds know where to go? Do you think Mr. Fluff dreams?" I answered as best I could, making up explanations when I didn't know the real ones. She never seemed to mind. Silas was present but distant. He'd leave for his office early, dressed impeccably, always pausing to kiss Lucy's forehead and ruffle her hair. He'd return around 6, immediately seeking out his daughter, listening intently as she recounted everything we'd done. With Lucy, he was patient and warm. With me, he maintained professional courtesy, polite, distant, unreadable. But I felt his eyes on me constantly. When I played with Lucy, when I made dinner, when I existed in his space. On the 4th evening, Lucy fell asleep during a movie, curled against my side with Mr. Fluff tucked under her chin. I carefully extracted myself and carried her to her room, tucking her under blankets covered in stars. When I turned around, Silas stood in the doorway, watching. "She usually fights bedtime," he said quietly. "We had a busy day. Park visit wore her out." He nodded but didn't move. We stood there in the dim hallway, the silence stretching uncomfortably. Then he gestured toward the balcony. "Want a drink?" I followed him outside into the cool evening air. The city sprawled below us, millions of lights creating artificial constellations. He poured 2 glasses of something amber and handed me one without asking if I wanted it. "You're good with her," he said after a long pause. "She's easy to be good with." I took a sip. Whiskey, smooth and probably expensive. "Most people find children exhausting. Most people aren't getting paid what you're paying me." He almost smiled. "Is that the only reason?" I considered lying, then didn't. "No, she's special, smart, creative. She just needs someone to pay attention. Her mother never did." The statement hung in the air like a confession he hadn't meant to make. I didn't know how to respond, so I stayed quiet, giving him space to continue or not. "Lucy's mother left when she was 4 months old," Silas said, staring at the skyline. "Said she wasn't ready for motherhood, signed away her rights and disappeared. Lucy doesn't remember her." He took a long drink. "I've kept her sheltered since then. Private schools, limited public appearances, but it's getting harder. She deserves a normal childhood, but I don't know how to give her that." "She seems happy," I offered carefully. "With you here, Yes. He turned to face me fully, and the intensity of his gaze made my breath catch. She laughs more. Talks more. She's been asking if you'll stay permanently. My chest tightened. The contract is 3 weeks. Contracts can be renegotiated. He stepped closer, and suddenly the balcony felt much smaller. I want you to consider extending. Not just for Lucy's sake. Then for whose? Mine. The word hung between us, heavy with implications I wasn't ready to examine. His hand reached out and brushed against my arm. Barely a touch, just fingertips grazing the fabric of my shirt. But it sent electricity racing down my spine. You make this place feel less empty, he continued. Voice lower now, less like a museum and more like a home. That matters. To both of us. I should have stepped back. Should have maintained professional distance. But I didn't move. Silas, you don't have to decide now. He withdrew his hand, the warmth disappearing. Just think about it, please. He went back inside, leaving me alone with the city lights and a half-empty glass of whiskey that tasted like complicated decisions. I stayed outside for another hour, trying to convince myself that the flutter in my chest was just anxiety about the job. But I'd never been good at lying to myself. Inside, through the window, I could see Silas sitting in his home office, illuminated by laptop light. Even from here, I could see the tension in his shoulders, the weight he carried alone. 3 weeks suddenly felt both too long and not nearly enough. Peter, look! I made a picture of you. Lucy came running into the living room, her art supplies trailing behind her like a colorful comet tail. She thrust her sketchbook at me with both hands, practically vibrating with excitement. I set down my tablet and accepted the offering with appropriate ceremony. The drawing was classic 5-year-old. Stick figures with circle heads and triangle bodies. But she'd captured something real. The figure on the left had messy brown scribbles for hair and 2 bright blue dots for eyes. That was clearly me. Next to it stood a taller figure in what looked like a black rectangle. A suit, I realized, and between them, holding both their hands, was a smaller figure with a wide smile. This is all 3 of us, Lucy explained, pointing to each figure. Like a real family. My throat constricted. The casual way she said it, like it was the most natural thing in the world, hit me harder than expected. Lucy, this is really beautiful. I'm going to show Papa. She snatched the book back and ran toward the kitchen, where I could hear the rare sound of Silas moving around. Usually the staff handled meal prep, but he'd given them the afternoon off. I followed slowly, giving them space but curious about his reaction. Silas was making coffee, or attempting to. He held the expensive machine's manual in one hand, looking slightly annoyed with the technology, which was ironic for a tech billionaire. When Lucy burst in, he immediately abandoned his task and crouched to her level. What have you got there, sweetheart? She showed him the drawing with pride. I watched his face carefully from the doorway. His expression shifted, barely noticeable. Just a subtle softening around his eyes. A slight relaxation of his jaw. But I'd learned to read his micro-expressions over the past 2 weeks. This is wonderful. His voice carried genuine warmth. Should we put it somewhere special? The fridge. Lucy bounced on her toes. Like real families do. Silas retrieved a magnet shaped like the Eiffel Tower, probably from some business trip, and carefully secured the drawing to the stainless steel refrigerator. Lucy beamed at her artwork's place of honor, then ran off toward her room, already moving on to her next adventure. Suddenly, the kitchen felt much smaller. Silas straightened, turning toward me. The coffee machine hissed behind him. Forgotten. We stood there in the afternoon light streaming through the windows, and I became acutely aware of how domestic this moment was. She's getting attached, I said quietly. More than expected. I know. Silas leaned against the counter, his dark eyes fixed on me with unsettling intensity. What about you? Me? My voice cracked slightly, betraying my composure. Are you getting attached? He pushed away from the counter, closing the distance between us with measured steps. Each movement was deliberate, predatory in its precision. Or is this still just a job to you? I swallowed hard. Lucy is incredible. Of course I care about her. Just Lucy? He was close now, dangerously close, invading my personal space in a way that should have felt threatening but instead sent heat racing down my spine. My breath caught. Silas, what are you? His hand came up, fingers curling gently under my chin, tilting my face toward his. The touch was light but firm, giving me every opportunity to pull away. I'm a single father, Peter. His voice dropped lower, intimate. My entire world revolves around that little girl. I don't let people into our lives. I don't trust easily. I don't. He paused, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw with agonizing slowness. I don't feel things anymore. Haven't for years. Built walls too high to climb. Then why? Because you're different. The words came out rough, like they hurt to say. You came here as hired help, but now when I come home, this place doesn't feel like a museum. It feels lived in. Real. You've made it a home. For Lucy, yes. But for me too. My heart hammered against my ribs. This is complicated. Everything worth having is complicated. He rested his forehead against mine and I could feel his breath against my lips. Tell me to stop. Tell me you don't feel anything when I'm near you. And I'll step back. I'll keep this professional. I'll maintain the distance. I couldn't say it. The lie wouldn't form. Because I did feel something, had been feeling it for days now. The way my pulse jumped when he entered a room. How I'd started looking forward to his return from work. The warmth that spread through my chest when he smiled. Those rare, genuine smiles that Lucy could draw out of him. Say it, he whispered. A challenge and a plea. Instead of speaking, I made a choice. I leaned in just slightly. Barely a movement. But it was enough. He kissed me like he was testing the waters. Slow and careful, giving me every chance to retreat. When I didn't, when I kissed him back instead, something shifted. The kiss deepened, became more urgent. His hands moved to my waist, pulling me closer, and I let myself fall into it. Into him, into this impossible situation I'd somehow found myself in. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. His eyes had gone almost black, pupils blown wide. Stay, he said, and it wasn't a command but a request. When the 3 weeks end, stay with us, with me. I nodded because words seemed inadequate. What else could I do? I was already in too deep, already drowning, and I'd stopped fighting the current days ago. His hand found mine, fingers intertwining, and we stood there in the kitchen with Lucy's drawing watching us from the refrigerator. A family, she'd called it. And for the first time in my life I understood what that word really meant. Peter, who was that woman? Lucy's small voice pulled me from my thoughts. We were at the park, one of her favorite spots, with the big oak trees and the sandbox that she claimed had magic properties. The bodyguards maintained their usual discreet perimeter, close enough for safety but far enough to give us space. But that space had just been violated. A woman had approached us 10 minutes ago, impeccably dressed in a designer pantsuit, her blonde hair styled in perfect waves, her smile sharp as broken glass. She'd looked at Lucy with an expression I couldn't quite read and said 4 words that had frozen my blood. You've gotten so big. Lucy hadn't recognized her, hadn't shown any sign of familiarity. That told me everything I needed to know. Nobody important, princess. I kept my voice light, easy. Want to try the swings? I bet I can push you high enough to touch the clouds. Her face lit up and she ran toward the swing set, the encounter already forgotten with a child's resilience. I wished I could do the same. The woman hadn't left. She'd waited until Lucy was out of earshot, then approached me with the confidence of someone who knew she held all the cards. So you're Silas's latest acquisition. Her voice was smooth, cultured, dripping with condescension. How, quaint. I'm Lucy's companion. I kept my tone neutral, professional. Nothing more. Companion. She tasted the word like fine wine, finding it amusing. Such a careful label, but let me be direct. I'm Naomi Crowe, Lucy's biological mother, and I'm here to reclaim what's mine. My stomach dropped. Silas had mentioned her once, briefly, but I'd never imagined she'd simply appear like this. You abandoned her. The words came out harder than intended. You have no right. I made a mistake. Naomi's expression didn't change. Still perfectly composed. I was young, unprepared for motherhood. But I've changed. Therapy, meditation, found myself, and now I'm ready to be the mother Lucy deserves. She doesn't even know who you are. That's Silas's fault, not mine. Her eyes hardened. He's poisoned her against me, kept me away. But courts favor mothers, especially mothers who can prove they've reformed. And I can prove it. Documented therapy sessions, stable employment, a home ready for a child. This is about money. I couldn't keep the disgust from my voice. Silas just went public with his company. This timing isn't coincidental. Her smile widened. Think what you like. My lawyer will be filing custody papers next week. And when they do, they'll paint a picture of an absent workaholic father who leaves his daughter with random strangers. She gestured at me dismissively. People like you, no credentials, no background, no business being near a child. She walked away before I could respond, heels clicking against the pavement with military precision. I watched Lucy on the swings, laughing as she kicked her legs, trying to go higher. She looked so happy, so secure in her little world. The thought of that being destroyed made me physically ill. When we returned to the penthouse, I knew immediately that Silas had already heard. He stood in his office, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gripping the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles had gone white. When he saw us, he ended the call abruptly. "Lucy, sweetheart, why don't you go watch cartoons? I need to talk to Peter for a minute." She sensed the tension but didn't argue, disappearing into her room with Mr. Fluff tucked under her arm. The moment her door closed, Silas's careful control cracked. "Naomi contacted you." It wasn't a question. "At the park," she said. I know what she said. He moved to the bar cart, poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a glass, drained it in one swallow. "My lawyer called 20 minutes ago. She filed preliminary custody papers then. This wasn't a coincidence. She timed it perfectly. What are her chances?" I hated how my voice shook. "Better than they should be." Silas poured another drink but didn't touch it. "Biology carries weight in family court. And she's built a narrative. Reformed mother seeking redemption versus workaholic father who prioritizes business over family. It's effective because it's partially true. You're an amazing father who hires strangers to care for his daughter." He finally looked at me and the anguish in his eyes was devastating. "That's how they'll frame it. How can I argue when it's exactly what I did? I brought you here on a 3-week contract. You're not family, not a qualified nanny, just some guy I found on the street. I'm more than that now." The words came out before I could stop them. "We both know I'm more than that. Do we?" His voice turned sharp, defensive. "What are you, Peter? Define it for the court. Define what you are to Lucy. To me. Because I can't, and that's going to cost me everything." The accusation stung because he was right. We'd fallen into something undefined, beautiful but fragile, and now reality was crashing down around us. "Then let me help." I moved closer, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. "We get the best lawyers. We document everything. Lucy's happiness, her progress, her stability. Her therapist can testify. School records show improvement. We build a case that proves she's thriving here. And what about you?" Silas's voice cracked. "When they ask about you, what do I say? That you're my employee? My boyfriend? My partner?" Every answer damages the case in different ways. "Then I'll testify." I reached for his hand and after a moment's hesitation, he let me take it. "I'll tell them the truth, that I care about Lucy like she's my own. That this arrangement might be unconventional, but it works. That she's loved and safe and happy." "You'd do that?" He searched my face like he was looking for proof. "Risk being torn apart on the stand? Having your entire life examined?" "Yes." The answer came easily. "Because this isn't just a job anymore. You know that. I know that. Whatever this is between us, whatever we're becoming, it's real. And I'm not walking away from it. From her. From you." His facade shattered. He pulled me into an embrace so tight it bordered on painful, his face buried in my shoulder and I felt his whole body trembling. "I can't lose her," he whispered against my neck. "She's everything." "You won't." I held him just as tightly, feeling his heart racing against mine. "We'll fight this together. Whatever it takes." Standing there in the fading afternoon light, holding this broken man together, I realized something profound. I'd stopped being a temporary fixture in their lives. Somewhere between pancake breakfasts and bedtime stories and stolen moments in kitchens, I'd become permanent. Now I just had to convince a court of that. The courtroom was designed to be intimidating. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, an American flag that hung like a judgment. I sat 3 rows behind Silas, close enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched and released in a rhythm that matched my own anxious heartbeat. Naomi sat across the aisle, perfectly composed. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a modest blue dress, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a way that suggested maternal responsibility. She'd even arranged for a few photographers outside, capturing her teary-eyed arrival. The performance was flawless. Her lawyer opened strong, painting a picture of a reformed woman who'd made mistakes but deserved a second chance. He presented therapy records, character witnesses, a psychologist who testified about the importance of maternal bonds. He made Silas sound like a corporate robot who viewed parenting as another business transaction. Mr. Crowe works 14-hour days, the lawyer stated, pacing before the jury. He has missed recitals, parent-teacher conferences, and bedtime routines. He outsources his daughter's care to a rotating cast of nannies, and most recently, to an unqualified individual with no background in childcare whatsoever. That's when Silas's lawyer stood for cross-examination. She was sharp, methodical, and came armed with documentation. School records showing Lucy's dramatic improvement in grades and social interaction over the past month. A letter from Lucy's teacher praising her increased confidence. Statements from Lucy's therapist noting significant progress in managing anxiety related to public attention. And who is present during these improvements? Silas's lawyer asked pointedly. Who has been the constant in Lucy's daily life during this transformation? The answer hung in the air, obvious and damning to Naomi's case. Then came the moment I'd been dreading. The defense calls Peter Monroe to the stand. My legs felt disconnected from my body as I walked to the witness box. I swore on the Bible, sat down, and tried to remember how to breathe. Mr. Monroe, please describe how you came to be involved in Lucy Crowe's life. I told the story as honestly as I could. The paparazzi incidents, the impromptu rescue, Silas's offer. The lawyer guided me through the timeline, establishing that I hadn't sought this position, hadn't manipulated my way into their lives. And your relationship with Silas Crowe? The question came with clinical precision. How would you characterize it? The courtroom went silent. I could feel Naomi's lawyer leaning forward, ready to pounce on whatever I said. I looked at Silas, and he gave me the smallest nod, permission to tell the truth. I love him. The words felt impossibly loud in the quiet room. And I love Lucy. What started as a temporary job became something neither of us expected. We're building something real, slowly, carefully, but genuinely. We're becoming a family. Naomi's lawyer attacked immediately, questioning my finances, my motivations, my qualifications. He tried to paint me as a gold digger, an opportunist taking advantage of a lonely man. But I answered each question calmly, honestly, refusing to be shaken. The hardest part came next. The judge called for Lucy to be interviewed privately. Standard procedure in custody cases involving young children. Silas went pale. This was the moment that mattered most. Lucy's own voice, her own choice. We waited in crushing silence. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. When the judge returned, her expression was unreadable. I've spoken extensively with Lucy Crowe, she began, settling back behind her bench. Children her age are impressionable, certainly, but they're also remarkably honest about their feelings and sense of safety. She looked directly at Naomi, and I saw the first crack in the woman's perfect facade. Miss Crowe, I don't doubt that you've undergone therapy or that you believe you're ready for motherhood now. However, parenting isn't about what we're ready for, it's about what the child needs. You left Lucy when she was 4 months old. You signed away your rights voluntarily. You had no contact for nearly 5 years. And now, coincidentally timed with Mr. Crowe's company going public, you've returned claiming maternal instincts. The judge's voice hardened. Lucy doesn't remember you. When asked about her family, she spoke extensively about her father and about Mr. Monroe, describing detailed daily routines, favorite activities, feelings of safety and love. When asked about you, she had no recognition. Naomi's composure finally cracked. A single tear, whether genuine or performed, I couldn't tell, rolled down her cheek. Furthermore, the judge continued, The evidence shows that Lucy has thrived in her current environment. Her academic performance has improved. Her therapist reports significant progress. Her teachers note increased engagement. Whatever unconventional arrangement exists in the Crowe household, it's clearly working for the child in question. The gavel came down like thunder. Custody remains with Silas Crowe. Miss Crowe is granted supervised visitation rights, 1 afternoon per month, pending evaluation after 6 months. This court prioritizes the child's established stability and expressed preferences. We're adjourned. The relief that crashed through me was so intense I thought I might pass out. Silas's shoulders sagged, and when he turned around, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. He reached back, and I took his hand, not caring who saw. Outside, the media circus waited. Cameras, shouted questions, microphones thrust forward like weapons. Silas could have deflected, could have given a corporate non-answer and escaped into his waiting car. Instead, he pulled me close, his arm around my waist, and faced the cameras directly. "Peter Monroe is my partner," he stated clearly, voice carrying that CEO authority that made people listen. "He's Lucy's family, and I'm not apologizing for that or hiding it. Our family looks different, and we don't care what anyone thinks about that." My face burned, but my heart felt impossibly full. That evening, after Lucy was asleep, exhausted from the day's stress but peaceful, Silas found me on the balcony. The city stretched below us, millions of lights creating their own constellation. "Your 3 weeks ended yesterday," he said, joining me at the railing. "Technically, you're free to go." My stomach tightened. "Is that what you want?" "No." He turned to face me fully, taking both my hands in his. "I want to offer you something different. Not a contract, not an employment arrangement. Just stay, be part of this family. Officially, permanently, in whatever way feels right to you." "Silas, let me finish." His voice cracked slightly. "When you testified today, when you told that courtroom you loved us, I realized I've been holding back, protecting myself. But I don't want to protect myself anymore. I love you, Peter Monroe. I love how you make Lucy laugh, how you turned our house into a home, how you stood up in court and fought for us even when you had nothing to gain from it." Tears blurred my vision. "I love you too, both of you. This wasn't supposed to happen, but I'm so glad it did." He kissed me then, not desperate like in the kitchen weeks ago, but soft and sure and full of promise. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "Welcome home," he whispered. And standing there in his arms, with Lucy sleeping safely inside and the city lights below, I finally understood what home really meant. It wasn't a place. It was this feeling, these people, this impossible, beautiful life we'd accidentally built together. "Thank you," I said softly, "for letting me in. Thank you for staying." We stood together as the night deepened, and somewhere in my chest something settled, solid and permanent, and right. I'd stumbled into their lives by accident, just a stranger passing by. But I was staying forever.